Hi, I'm Pam Hayes from Hayes Sewing Machine Company, and welcome back to our creative videos. And today we're going to be talking about the Crossroads quilt. It's done out of the Quilts in a Jiffy, and the quilt that we're doing is this one right here. And what you'll love is basically it has two pieced blocks. So it has kind of like a half block and then the full block, and that's it. All the other things that are the kind of the full print, you have to cut out different size squares, but there's no piecing to that. So, and again, they will let you know exactly how big you need to cut the blocks. We're going to work on doing the big block first, and the big block has this main fabric, and then we have two that are going to go on either side. So just like that. The components that you're going to be working with for this one is, let me just grab it in the book real quick. You're going to be working with Unit A as well as Unit B. So these are going to be Unit Bs. They will tell you you're going to be basically cutting it, let me get my eyeballs on, 5.5 inches. So you're going to be cutting it 5.5 inches across. Now, if you are new to doing strip cutting, this is what it's going to look like. Let me just give it a quick press. All right. So you're going to have a long strip of material that looks just like this. It's going to have, again, in my case, the pink in the center and then the green on either side. They want you to cut this 5.5 inches. So first thing I like to do is I like to line this up and make sure I have a nice even edge. So I'm using the lines on my mat, and we're just going to cut straight across. What I'm trying to do is keep the ruler centered on the seam. You don't want it to go like that. Now we're going to do 5.5 inches. So we line it up 5.5 inches. And ta-da! So really simple. Now when we go to piece this together, because we have the seams pressed to the pink on both sides, you're going to find that it's going to nestle nicely together. So you'll notice just by me having pressed it to the pink, one seam allowance is going one direction, one is going the other. Now for myself, I will just lay this down and sew, and I'm using my 1/4 inch foot. So we're going to take it, and I can feel that they're nestling nicely together. And then I'm going along and I'm going to kind of hold the next section. And again, I'm using my 1/4 inch foot. And then it's lined it up nicely. Now, if the thought of doing that kind of makes you twitch, and if you've seen our videos before, quilt tacks are also another wonderful viable option. Now, for a quilt tack, I'll show you how to do quilt tacks on this side. You're going to leave it at the normal length of stitch, and you're going to basically cut, or sew I should say, so 2 or 3 stitches rather on either side of the seam. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So we're going to line it up. And we're going to sew a couple of stitches on either side. And then we're going to open it up and make sure it lines up. Now the advantage of doing this is if it doesn't line up, you haven't sewn your entire seam. So then when you line it up, you could pull that stitching out very easily and stitch again. But it lined up nicely with my quilt tacks. So we're going to take and we're going to sew our 1/4 inch all the way down, making sure the edges are lined up. All right. And we're going to give it a press so it's nice and flat. Okay, where this is going to go is right in that center section. So that is row 6. So if you take a look, it's this row right here. So you can see I have my pieced half block, my full block that I just cut, the block we just did, the cut block, and then the half. So all of that is done and we're on row 5. So at this point, we're going to seam this together. And we're going to line it up. And we're just going to sew it down. All right, so that's the one side, and then we're going to sew this one together. Now, technically, when you line it up, they should roughly match. However, if you, for some reason, you have a real kind of gappy on one side, remember, put the bigger piece down towards your feed dogs. That way it'll help ease it through for you. All right, so again, we're going to stitch down. And that is that row. So that one is done. Now we're on our final row. That is number 6. So you'll notice I have, again, a plain one that has just a square, longer rectangle. This is the block we're going to be piecing next. And they look almost the same size as far as width, but not quite. So close, but no cigar. You'll notice the pink is a little wider than the green one, and that's correct. Alrighty, so when we line this up, I only actually need one set. Again, we're going to line this up. Remember our seam allowance, one is facing towards that pink, the other one's facing in, so you'll be just fine. Use your quilt tacks if that's your preference. And then we're just going to sew after you've done your quilt tacks, if you want to do them, check to make sure the corners line up. And we're going to sew all the way across. All right. We're going to give it a press. And just so you know, the wider one, the pink in my case, goes to the edge. we're going to line this up and sew my square on. All right, so that one's lined up, and then we're going to attach this guy to the bigger piece. All right, and we're going to sew all the way down. All right, and now I need to press away. So you see how I just kind of hold it up? So we're going to take, and I'm going to make sure the seam allowance is being pressed away from me. All right. And I'm going to throw a clip on there so I know which side. Now, I press the seam on this row this direction, so I'm going to press the seam on the next row, the final row, towards the clip. So I went away from the clip, now I'm coming towards. And we're going to make sure, again, we're pressing everything. And you want to make sure you're pressing nice because you don't want any accordions. So you don't want any pleats. What I mean by an accordion, sometimes you'll get it where it kind of does that to you. And that's not going to lay particularly flat, so you want to make sure it's nice and flat. We're going to attach these two rows together before we put it to the main quilt. So I'm going to line it up, and this time I am going to do some quilt tacks just to make sure everything is held together nicely. Now just making sure I got this lined up nice. Alrighty. So making sure my seam allowances are butting together. And I'm going to throw a couple quilt tacks in. And we're going to do the same thing here. Just going to make sure it's lined up. Remember, quilt tacks, so a couple of stitches before and after. And we're going to do another quilt tack. And then we're going to do another quilt tack here. Alrighty. Now, once you've done your quilt tacks on your corners, remember, we're going to open them up and we're going to check to see whether we like them. Not too shabby. That one looks pretty good. So does that one and that one. All right. Now, when we line this up, we're going to get this lined up. Again, we're going to sew our 1/4 inch seam. Now, if you think that one side is a little too big, something that's nice because you've done the quilt tacks, you can flip it over and we can sew from the other side. So I think that middle block, I'm going to need to put it down because it's just a little bit on the bigger side. So remember, nobody's going to know which direction you sewed it. You're just going to take it and line it up. And I won't tell if you won't. All right, and this is the one that I was, it had a little bit too much pooch for me. So, little hint, if you hold on to the top layer, just gently, you don't have to have a killer death grip on it. That'll help ease everything in. All right, we're going to go and we're going to give it a press. Okay, now that guy's all set. Now we need to attach it to our rest of our quilt. So we're going to line this up like so. I always lay it out just to make sure. And what we're looking for is this. Can you see how I ended up with the quilt that was hanging beside me? The fruit was in the center section, and can you see now it's on the side? All right, so we're going to line this up. And we're going to take, and again, we're going to throw in a couple of quilt tacks. Gotta make Loretta happy. Okay, so that is there. Quilt tack here. Do this corner. And then we're going to line it up on this one. All right, we want to take a look-see to make sure everything is lined up proper. Yep, looks good. Looks good. All right. Now, when you line up the whole row, you're going to take a look-see, and if you find that you have like one that's pooching a little bit, remember that's what you put on the bottom, and this one row looks great. So just choose a side. We'll choose this one. And we're going to sew our 1/4 inch seam all the way down. And as you're sewing down, we're just going to make sure we go kind of through that quilt tack. Make sure everything's together. Alrighty. Last couple of blocks. Alright, and the last little section. All right, so we're going to take a look-see here, and doesn't that look spectacular? All right, now, as with all of the quilts that are in that book, they're going to have borders to them. So, it's going to have a nice green border to start with. That's border number 1. And then it's going to have border number 2. And isn't that going to be sharp? Alrighty. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.